Hello, and welcome. We return once more for Worldbuilding Wednesday. Assuming that everything is working, it has, of course, been a while. Let's see if I can't remember how to get this all working. There we go. It is, as stated, Worldbuilding Wednesday, in which we, well, talk about world building, but usually go off on tangents about anything and everything space related. So, for today, let's, well, it's been a while, a bit over 2 weeks, so I'm not sure where to exactly begin. I suppose with the usual. Well, as always, I'm your host, Casimir Basilius, Imperial Lord, and all that. As for world building, we will, of course, be world building Galactic Requiem, as we always do. I don't think we've ever world built anything else, ever, so that's to be expected. Now, we won't be working on the map, we'll most all be rambling. However, on Solo Sunday, which is on Friday, different in different calendars, then we will be actually playing the game, our solo game. But we might do a little bit of work on preparing today, later. Anyway, let's get to it. Here we are. So, as per usual, well, I'm trying to find a topic, I suppose. More so, well, like I said, we've been away for a while, and I just popped back in, and not really a plan or anything. Been real busy recently. Lots of Imperial business to attend to. But now that all the Imperial business has been attended to, we'll get back to our regular schedule. Unfortunately, we have had a few other errors, sort of. More so, the electrical systems in my ship have failed. This is why I'm looking up there, because for some reason, part of our electrical system isn't working, which isn't ideal. We'll get conscripts on it shortly, probably after this. Anyway, where to begin with world building? Well, as you may know, we have a variety of maps both on the city level and the galactic level, everything in between. A lot of the lore is already there, which I suppose is why we have our lore videos theoretically once a month, not this month, unfortunately, as well. Being busy has thrown my entire schedule off. So, we'll get back to those two in our schedule, along with news, space news, that is, of course, galactic events and all that. But, where to begin? So, as you may know, we have years and years and years and years of lore. I suppose we'll go over a little bit of it in a very unformatted manner. It's not like we can't. So, we best go over to the actual map. Here we are. I say actual map, I mean there's lots of maps, they're all actual maps. Here's our galactic map, showing the rough scale of the galaxy. Of course, our galactic map isn't entirely accurate. So for here, we have what we call civilized space, or the core nations and all that, as per usual. But we have had a few, I think we've been over this once before. There are a few omissions from this map due to the way it was made. So, when I close that it minimizes. Not ideal, but once again, it's been a while trying to make sure I'm doing all this right again. The galaxy map has a few flaws due to the way it was made. The way it was made is originally the original galaxy map in Galactic Requiem. Well, it's not even technically original. The original galaxy map was a lot of dots on graph paper, the small lined graph paper, and little notes on that. But in short, the map we have here is technically, it was then converted to a map tools map at a scale of 1 square to 1 light year. That didn't work out. I mean, it works out, it just causes problems. Map tools gets, well, I say map tools. Map tools is generally fine with it. Our device that we use gets upset when we have too many tokens on a screen. So we switch to 1 square is a sector, or 150 light years. But we needed to make it to convert the maps. To convert the maps, we basically tracked the map onto a secondary image. But in short, we basically have a cutoff at the top of the galaxy. Well, it's a galaxy at the top of the civilized space grid. A cutoff to the right, a cutoff to the left, and a cutoff to the bottom. And anything outside of that cutoff was not maintained. It's there, galaxy-wise and lore-wise, of course. It's just not visible in our little map. But to be fair, anything to the west of the galaxy is literally just a bit of wild territory. Like, it's just a little bit. And over to our north, the same. Technically, it's the top half of this nation and a little bit of a border up here between those. We lost quite a bit to the right. I say lost. I can always just bring up the 1 light year, 1 square galaxy map like I could, and then convert it over. But there's nothing too important over here. It's just a bit of the northern territories. I suppose that's relatively important. But over here is just northern territories and imperial lands. To the south, we lost a lot of the nations of the Terran breakaway. There's a lot of that over here. And just a clip of the Warzone-ish area. And there were some nations over here somewhere. Anyway, it's not like they're not there anymore. They're just not on our map. Anyway, enough about how maps work. Also, our new system, like when it's not like it's new. We've had it this way for a while now. But the great thing about this is it allows us to determine where things are in the galaxy a lot easier. Because we can just be like, things are measured from the sector. We've been over the Galactic Standard Measuring System before. Things are measured based on the Council Capital, this being the Council Capital. But basically, measured how many sectors south, how many sectors north, how many sectors east, how many sectors west, to get where things are. Anyway, technically, I don't believe this image right here actually displays the Council core. It's just a stand-in I believe I used to show scale. I'd have to find the actual core map to tell you whether this is it or not, which I have somewhere. But this is a good example of scale. When I say 1 square used to be 1 light year, and now 1 square is 150 light years. For I mean 1 square being a sector, being 150 light years. You can see these yellow squares being subsectors of, I believe, 15 by 15 light years. And these little squares being singular light years within there, being where objects, specifically systems, are located. You can have multiple stars or even multiple systems in 1 light year. We even have globular clusters and open clusters, which have a lot of stars within a small amount of space. But that's not important. In short, this is just a rough example of a scale, I suppose, because you got your single systems, your subsectors, your sectors, your megasectors, and then the core, I suppose, gigasector or something. Or, as we call it, the core nations, central nations, and all civilized space. Which is funny, because the majority of the empire is actually not in civilized space. But that's just the terminology used. But I suppose we're really getting to our rambling, which is a lot of what we do here. Let's see. What else is there to cover? Well, I mean, like I said, we've been over all this before. So, as per, well, I suppose we can cover the overall state of the galaxy. So that's not any singular law thing. I think I've been over it before, though. Which is, of course, currently, we are in the Second Galactic War. Well, there's many a war going on, but this is technically the Second Galactic War because, well, the majority of the nations in civilized space are at war. I suppose it's not really a galactic war by what you might consider a galactic war, given that the majority of the rest of the galaxy probably doesn't even know the war's going on. But, you know, I mean, how much is it? A tenth? Let's actually figure that out. Because I'm curious now, too. 1 second. Okay, so it's about 10 sectors across, or 200,000 or so light years across, by roughly 10. So, I mean, not counting the corners, of course, I suppose. We're looking at like 1/100th if it's 10 by 10. So, you know, 1/100th the galaxy, technically less than 1/100th is at war, but, you know, still considered a galactic war. Now, it's not, of course, anywhere near the scale of the wars of old. I say the wars of old, I mean the imperial conquest. Back when the Grand Dimensional Empire, where I'm from, took over the galaxy from the ancient nations. But, you know, technically, the majority of the modern nations, I believe, didn't have FTL at that time, and only basically arose during the era of after the. I mean, they had slower than light travel, if you want to be technical. They had colonies and all that, and the entire colonization efforts got messed up by that. But, you know, technically, I suppose there are nations older than the imperial arrival. I mean, that's. I mean, where to even begin talking about all the lore of everything? It gets quite complex. As you can see in the top left, our date is different than your date. It being 5, 10, 7, 8, 9, 4. Now, for the record, we've been over all of this before. 7894 is not your future. Technically, or everything here takes place in a different realm than yours, but it is for you, I suppose, 2/21 2024 or 2/22 2024, something like that. But for us, it's 05, 10, 7, 8, 9, 4. It's not like it's your future, it's just different calendar. Hell, your Earth or Elysia isn't even here, so, you know. But in short, technically the last 4 digits of 7894 aren't even the full date. Like, if you want to be technical, it's like, as we quickly go over to the lore book, here we are. 112,257,894. Of course, our universe runs on a bit different laws of physics than yours, given the whole, well, FTL, magic, and eldritch monstrosities. Not that magic's common. It's rare, actually, as is psionics, casting, and all that. Well, debatably rare. Depends on where you are. If you are up north, the statement I made was ridiculous, as the northern nations have a copious amount of casters, psionics, and magic, while in the south, yeah, we call it the north and south, even though we're sort of in the center of the galaxy, I suppose, but, you know, in short, um, it just, lost my train of thought there. It happens. I mean, if you want to know, also, the core of the galaxy's here. Now, if you're wondering why that does not appear to be a black hole, I mean, to be fair, it doesn't even look like this. But in the core of the galaxy was a black hole. A galaxy core black hole, supermassive, of course. Long ago, the Empire, during colonization, and the wars with the ancients and all that, built a birch world. I believe it's called a birch world. Basically, a shell around the central black hole. Unfortunately, what I say might be considered treason or something. Maybe. I'm sure if it is, it'll be bleeped out for galactic broadcast. But unfortunately, due to a small conflict within the Empire, our core birch world sort of exploded, cracked open. There are remnants of it, I suppose, in the center of the galaxy. Shards more massive than you can likely picture. But it's just not ideal, you know? And yet, we remain the most powerful faction in the galaxy. Despite our current civil war, yes, the Empire is currently in a civil war, unfortunately. Which is why, I suppose, I suppose a lot of things are going on. I have to be rather careful with what I say. Of course, as a loyal Imperial Lord, there are certain things that should not be stated. Certain things that are beyond simply being bleeped out for broadcast. Certain things that are treasonous to say. But that's not important. So, long history in the galaxy. I mean, if you want to be technical, it's not even the first Imperial Civil War. It was the old one. And then the one that might be... The original Imperial Civil War might, I suppose, be considered one continuous event, even though there were multiple segments to it. The current one is definitely unrelated to the first one. I must only hope that the statement that there were two of them, at least, is not treasonous. So, other than that, well, I suppose it's not treasonous. different galactic views within the Empire caused the first Galactic War. The first not Galactic War, Imperial Civil War. Specifically, the first Imperial Civil War was caused due to a disagreement in, well, view of colonization of the galaxy. It started after the defeat of the ancients. Time-wise, there was imperial colonization, which led to the downfall of the ancient nations, and then the Imperial Civil War, the first one, which was basically due to the Empire stopping colonization. I'm sure, given the fact that if you haven't figured it out, the grand dimensional empire being dimensional has the ability to, well, travel between dimensions. I know, shocking, right? Absolutely shocking. But in short, the original imperial method is secure a galaxy, move to the next one. Secure, move on. Until, well, everything is conquered. Throughout all, well, everything. Unfortunately, well, I don't, is it treasonous to say unfortunately? Who knows? But in short, given the fact that the Empire arrived a few million years back, you might find it a bit surprising, being the most technologically advanced nation in the galaxy that remains. I mean, I suppose the ancients were technologically advanced, at least as much as the Empire. Debatably, more so in certain places. But in short, then why do such small nations exist, as you can see here? Like, surely the Empire could crush all these lesser nations. I mean, look at the territorial differences. I mean, you can't surely blame all of that on imperial lords infighting. You're right. You're right. Long ago, there was a sort of halt to the conquest of the galaxy. And, well, without getting into everything, because we'd get into we'd definitely be getting into treasonous territory there. But in short, well, disagreement due to the fact that the galaxy was no longer being absolutely conquered with all the might of the Empire. And so, well, the First Imperial Civil War. The origins of the Second Imperial Civil War, the one that's currently going on, cannot be spoken of without immediately being branded a traitor. But needless to say, it is absolutely different for different purposes. Like, completely unrelated. So, I mean, if we're also being somewhat treasonous, the Second Imperial Civil War has sort of thrown the Empire into decline. I mean, let's be honest, the Second Imperial Civil War is bigger than the First Imperial Civil War by a large margin and has thrown the Empire into decline. Possibly, maybe, if it's not treasonous to say that. But it's not bigger than the first one due to the reasons behind it, which we can't get into. Especially given my position in the Empire, not my title or location, just it's a touchy subject given, well, yes, imperial politics. Imperial politics are complex. So, what about the galaxy as a whole? Surely there's more than just the galaxy. Yes, there is. There is a lot more. There are technically other, I mean, they're not shown on this map, but there are, of course, other galaxies and clusters and areas beyond the edge. Just because it's the edge of the main galaxy doesn't mean there's not stars and stuff out there. But as I'm sure you've heard, FTL, well, maybe you've heard, we had an entire lore video, our first lore video on it. And that being FTL. FTL works via lanes. It's not something that's, I mean, FTL exists as an underlying thing, an underlying layer, but you can't safely FTL without, well, what's the word I'm looking for? You can't safely FTL without significant chance of error without an FTL lane. So, obviously, the further out you go, the less FTL lanes you find. Just, well, that's not entirely true. It's not entirely true. More accurately, there's a area of space beyond the core in which FTL lanes are a lot more scarce, specifically to the south of the council and to the north of here. There's a bit of a area in which FTL is real difficult. Of course, in wild territory, void territory, FTL is exceptionally difficult. In eldritch space, well, that's a long story. Don't mess with tears in space. The entirety of the existence of eldritch space, void territory, and wild territory exists for, I suppose we can get into this. This is not like it's secret or anything. Wild territory was once colonized. It was once part of the Great Colonization. If you want to be technical, the majority of the galaxy was colonized. But in short, same reason why, technically, before the First Galactic War, there was a lot more central nations until the Empire sort of made that not a thing. The First Galactic War was most of civilized space against the Empire. The Second Galactic War is most of civilized space against the other half of civilized space. But in short, this used to be, long ago, relatively part of the colonized territories. Slower than light colonized, but colonized nonetheless. Spatial rifts and all that, due to the Imperial Ancient War and circumstances within, caused tears in space that led to, well, eldritch space, void territory, and anomalous space. If you want to be technical, they're similar, yet different. But in short, well, it's just not ideal. But that's why it exists. But that's what defensive station barriers are for. I mean, it's not ideal. To be fair, it's pretty much, you land on any world there, it's probably worse than a death world. That's not like It's not hy is the correct word hyperbole or something? Or over exaggeration. It is, in fact, worse than a death world. A death world usually is simply a world that is likely hostile to most sentient life, usually hostile in relatively small ways. You know, maybe the air's not breathable or toxic. The water may be acid or lava. The wildlife is likely really hard to kill and wants you dead. Maybe the world's full of corpse spiders. You know, the the plant life is toxic and or wants to kill you. A death world is something you can have a colony on, theoretically speaking. A death world can be tamed. You can bombard the death out of a death world with enough orbital bombardment or just terraforming. You can terraform the death out of a death world. It's not that much of a problem. Look, we build colonies on Chthonian worlds and lava planets. Not just we as the Empire. I mean, civilized nations can colonize ocean worlds with massive underwater creatures, lava worlds. It's not a problem. There are people who modify themselves to live in space. It's we live in an era in which you can just genetically modify yourself or upload your brain. It's not a problem, you know? So a death world, well, yes, for an unmodified Terran who's in a small colony, sure, a death world's dangerous. Oh no, the wildlife. Yeah, well, wildlife can't hold anything to a high caliber rifle. You know? Well, I say that, but that's not entirely true. I mean, if we just look over at the Seortans, right there, by the way, basically, large sentient rocks. They're not a death world. I mean, if you if you were to go there as a Terran, you might consider that a death world. But I mean, I say that, but like they're civilized. Like just because they're giant and made of stone doesn't mean they're not sentient and civilized. But you don't want to go to a world as a squishy Terran out into the wilderness when the local wolf equivalent is a shambling mound of stones that's just going to ram into you and shred you. Like, it's not ideal to go there as a Terran. I mean, I say that, but like, that's the wilderness. You can go to one of their cities, you'll be fine. You can even likely wander out into the wilderness and then come back and be fine. Just, don't poke the wildlife. I mean, better plan. Whatever you do, now, whatever you do, if you're one of those crazy people who's like, hey, I like going in caves. I want to go caving or cave diving. Don't, especially on a Seortan world. Like, you do realize they're sentient rocks, not all the rocks, of course, but that it's there. There's a lot of life in those caves that will kill you. It's not ideal. Same with going to, say, the United Insectoid Hives. It's not, or the Rocktoss, they're also insectoids. You would probably consider their worlds death worlds. As a Terran, and like I said, of course, you can probably go to their cities on some of their worlds. Some of their worlds don't consider Terrans to be worthy life forms, or anything that's not an insectoid, or even other insectoids. There have been entire wars against the bugs. Mostly against Terrans. I say Terrans, but like all the nations, but mostly what I mean is, what I'm trying to say is the council had several wars against the insectoids. There's a long history of that. I suppose we could get into at some point. Like, technically, some of the insectoid hives, well, there's a lot of bugs, and they can strip entire worlds. And then, when their worlds are stripped, they'll go to other worlds and try and, eat all the food on those worlds. And sometimes the food is sentient and does not want to be eaten. And then wars against the bugs start. You know? So it's not ideal. But, I mean, like, not all insectoids are mindless, hive driven bugs, of course. However, some insectoids are parts of hive minds, but then again, not every hive mind is insane. But it's just best not to test your luck by going to the insectoid worlds, you know? I mean, I'm pretty sure Ezeract Trade and Products, ETP, the mega corporation, one of the top 10 mega corporations, if I recall correctly, deal in alien goods and do, like, it's not like you can't go there. They get you can buy things from there. And hell, some insectoids have embraced Terran culture. And you can find insectoid worlds that are very much like what you would expect from a standard futuristic Terran society. While other worlds are so foreign that you would likely not comprehend. I mean, I say comprehend, I mean like culturally, it really depends. Like, if you're not part of the hive mind and don't have the sensory organs to be able to understand certain things, you're probably not going to comprehend at all, like literally. So, yeah. But as we were saying before we got off topic, death worlds. Why is eldritch space, corrupt space, and demonic territory worse than, well, death worlds? Because those territories were sealed. I say sealed. Well, they're currently cut off, but let's put it this way. The Empire was fighting the ancients at the time, before it became eldritch space. The Empire and the ancients were in a full-bound war. Just absolute warfare. Nanoswarms, self-replicating combat droids, pretty much everything. Advanced weaponry too, like not just self-replicating nanoswarms and bots and worse. Full-on reality-altering fields. All sorts of bad things. After that, so normally, when that's over, we, clean up. Make the machines stop doing what they do. Destroy the devices. I say destroy, but more so just disable them and all that. That didn't happen. But also, well, the rips in space and time caused, long story short, Eldritch. If you think, oh, well, how is Eldritch worse than a death world, then I can't help you. We're not talking light Eldritch. We're talking congratulations. You accidentally walked into an area wrong. You walked wrong. Your leg is gone. Congratulations. I mean, yeah, sure, Nanoswarm can just do that, but it's not ideal. But it gets worse when, well, let's just, where to even begin? man-made horrors beyond our comprehension. Well, beyond some comprehension. But throw in some eldritch monstrosities, and, well, it's it's not so much on a death world. You can go outside. You can you can mess around on a death world. You can, surprisingly. You can wander out into the forest with your gun, and you can probably make it back. Somebody might say, oh, yeah, there's a herd of creatures that will kill people over there. And theoretically, you can walk over, look at them, shoot at them, come back. Like, I'm not saying it's not risky, but it's possible. On an eldritch world, there's a high chance you've walked into an area that means that, congratulations, you're infected. You're now a pile of flesh. Congratulations. Despite that, you feel all the pain involved, even though you should be dead. It's really not ideal. Like, I, an Imperial Lord, would not go there. I would easily head over to a death world. I mean, yeah, I'd be a bit cautious, but, point being, you can send a super soldier to a death world. It's fine. A super soldier will probably be fine on a death world, especially if they have powered armor on. A super soldier in power armor is not fine on a eldritch world. That's, be it a tear in space so thin that simply by walking through it, you are cut in half. Or, surprise, you are no longer person shaped. Like, it's not ideal. And yes, I know what you might be thinking. Maybe. Didn't you say that there's mind uploading? Yes. Yes. I mean, it's expensive. It's not like you can just get a copy. And if you lose where the mind is stored, congratulations, you won't have those memories anymore. And I suppose that brings the whole question of, is it still you? I mean, we've answered that question. The question is yes, it is. Don't think too hard about it. But in short, well, eldritch things care not about our trifles of scientific knowledge. They will just as easily affect your electronics and or digital mind uploads. Like, when we say eldritch, we mean effects that pass beyond space and time. Like, if it messes up your brain, it theoretically could mess up your brain across all space-time. And thus having a backup might not really help you. So I wouldn't mess with one of those. Like, the actual border to get into there is surrounded by Imperial platforms designed to keep everything in and people out. I say and people out, like, ish. Technically, we don't try to keep people out very hard. But if you go in, you're not getting out of there. We're not going to let you out. But, I mean, it's not just the Empire. That's, to be fair, we share it with, well, the Council. Technically, the Council runs most of this area too, basically keeping some of our platforms. It's a loose agreement. We don't break even though we sometimes go to war with the Council. It's one of those things that's for the betterment of the galaxy as a whole. Something we don't mess with. But for the most part, such things are contained. Of course, that's not to say you can't find eldritch things outside of what's called eldritch space. You definitely can. I wouldn't try. I would not try. Worlds have been lost. Worlds have been lost. Not in the Empire, of course. But, in the rest of, well, that's not entirely true. Imperial worlds have been lost too. But, it's best not to mess with eldritch things. And yet, many, many nations insist on messing with things beyond their comprehension. That's actually one of the reasons the Empire, that's why we're, the good guys. Very much so, definitely. We have certain rules we impose on the galaxy, certain technologies that should not be looked into, that kind of thing. Definitely, definitely not to keep a technological superiority over the rest of the galaxy. Definitely not. Definitely not why we bombard worlds that go down certain research paths. Definitely not for technological superiority purposes. It's definitely to protect them from mistakes. Mistakes like becoming enemies of the Empire. You know? Like, look, if you have a research station researching something we don't like, would you rather we bombarded that research station out of existence or your nation out of existence? The answer's the research station. So we're protecting you from the Empire by being the Empire, you know? Also, as a side effect, we do also protect the stability of the galaxy. For instance, like one of those restricted technologies is time travel, which is, like theoretically possible, sort of, but it doesn't happen, thanks to the Empire. And it's not like the Empire hoards that technology for itself. The Empire doesn't do that either. It's considered a existential threat to existence, you know? Same with dimensional technology. While we are the grand dimensional empire, we keep a very strict maintenance on the research paths to dimensional technology by non-imperial nations and certain other technologies, like I said, but, it's for the safety of the galaxy. And why we don't stop research on eldritch things? Let's not wonder about that. Um, like, I suppose it's considered an existential threat, but it's not like we go absolutely insane about it if somebody's researching eldritch things. I actually need to check all imperial laws. Like, what's what's the rule in regards to Dimensional travel via eldritch entity. It's like, technically, not a technological path. So I don't think we cover that. Same with time travel via extra-dimensional eldritch entity. I think. We'd probably get upset if somebody used time travel. I don't know. It's not my department. I'm just a simple Imperial Lord. It's my job to run what? 3 worlds? Technically 4? If I can get 4 and finally get my title upgrade. I say worlds, I mean systems. I am still trying to get a 4th system so I can upgrade my title. So, if you have a spare star system, I'd 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 appreciate if you could just give me a spare star system. I wouldn't mind. It can doesn't even need to be a good star system. Just any star system. I mean, I wouldn't accept any star system. My territory being over here, ideally, I'd prefer. Oh, by the way, if you didn't know, my territory is not this entire area within that little. Oh, we've glitched. There we go. My territory is not the entire area in that little thing. No, no, no. It's actually a lot smaller. That would be the overall territory that mine is a part of, a little section of, well, vassals and all that. I'm a vassal lord to a greater lord who's serves the empire and all that. Oop, wrong key. Very well. I suppose this map is also slightly out of date. I mean, it is, but we are currently running a campaign. Not, I mean, we are too, here on Fridays. But the one we run is over here. But we're running another one. South 2019. There. This one doesn't have the markers because different campaign files, of course. Let's see. What else is there to ramble about? Like I said, didn't really have a plan today. Just want to get back into things. I suppose this is unideal to look at grid-wise. The grid gets painful to look at. We do have a gridless version, but I don't know where I put it. So let's swap over to... What? Oh. New, I think we've been over this. Map tools got updated. I was looking at the search bar for maps, and I was like, where's the right little bar that shows me? Is this the entire list? It's just similar color now, so I got confused. Ah, yes. The frontier. Do we have this one listed? I mean, when I say do we have it listed, I mean, of course we do. I just, like I said, different campaign files, it gets a little confusing. I did not rename that map. Luckily, we can go here, select the right layer eventually. Nope. Should have put it on there. Unfortunately, we can't find it. Theoretically, I should have it listed with its coordinates, which is like south 300, west 200. Um, let's see how close I was. It's not listed here either. That's unfortunate. I know I listed it somewhere. That's never ideal. Okay, never mind. But here you see, well, a good example of FTL lanes. This is what I usually use as my FTL lanes example, just because it's the easiest map we have in this campaign file with FTL lanes, I think. Um, yeah, it's the only one on this file with the lanes. I suppose we should do that for our other sector at some point. Let's see. What else is there to say? Oh, yeah, no, we'll be getting back onto our dice games and our news and lore videos and special things, special events, theoretically someday. Um, I had an idea, not sure if it's a good idea, but at some point I have an idea of a special event. I mean, I have several ideas of several special events, but one of them would be domain management, working on my personal conquests, specifically the territories I control, the stats, nation running. I mean, we do a lot of nation running. Why not show me running a nation? You know? Although, not sure how entertaining or boring that would be. I mean, look, we, I say that, we roll dice here. I mean, like, we have a dice roller open. What am I going on about? I mean, true, true. But to be fair, running a nation is spreadsheets the game. So, you know. But it's I mean, I find it work. But you'd see what I'm doing when I'm not here, when I'm off on imperial business. Well, some forms of imperial business, paperwork and all that. I also need to work on my personal estate, get its map better. But we actually have a sheet. Actually, remember where it is now. I imported it. It's crazy. The math might be slightly off though. Yep, there we are. How's that? Right. It's not. Okay, good. So, I suppose we'll go on about this. This is really just ramshackle rambling the episode, isn't it? Um, Nations have stats much like people. Their stats are affected by a variety of different things. And, well, those stats go from 1 to 100. Technically, they can go lower. I mean, they can't go lower than 1. But what I mean is, words use them. Nations start at a base of 10 in all of their stats. They can go lower than 10, but they can't go above 100. So they go from 1 to 100. And it's based on a bunch of different stats. Well, a bunch of money that you pour into each thing. And those stats basically make it, well, they have effects on running nations and all that. I'm gonna be honest, I can't bring that up without thanking a good associate. So, for the longest while, I was working on nation stats. I probably said all this before, but I'll say it again. A long time ago, I say a long time ago, it's not like it was a long time ago, I was working on nation stats. We, of course, are always working on Galactic Requiem to make things work. Nation stats always had a problem. And I would just like to thank Merlin Bishop for helping me solve a issue with nation stats. Go check them out. They stream aircraft things. But basically, for the longest while, nation stats weren't working. But we got them working. Now it's easier to determine what the stats are. Specifically, using a method that doesn't annoy me to no end. The previous method was absolutely infuriating. Now we have an exact number of worlds required to be chained together, theoretically speaking, to get nation stats to certain degrees in a method that works. Now a world can theoretically self-sustain itself to stat 40, theoretically. I know that on average, a world can sustain itself to stat 30. I believe with the math done, a world can theoretically sustain itself to stat 40 without outside worlds. I mean system. I'd have to bring up the chart. So stats are affected in groupings of 10. A world has stats, a system has stats, and a subsector has stats. Then there's nation stats, which are the total. It still gets a little confusing, mostly because we treat a nation as its subsector, but the capital subsector gets bonuses. Like, we sort of did away with nation stats. I say did away with nation stats. I mean, overall nation stats. They exist, but they're far less relevant than they normally would be. So, if you didn't know, a nation, let's use this for example. Here's the capital of Sacred Grove. This is the Sacred Grove's subsector, because the capital's in this subsector. Technically, they have this sector, but let's focus. The capital world provides half stats. All the other worlds, when I say world, I don't mean sector, system, I mean the world itself provides half stat for being the capital, and all of the other worlds provide 10th stat. Add it all together, you get the system stat. The system then provides, as the capital, half of its stats to the subsector. The subsector each other system provides basically 1/10 its stats. So you can basically get the math together to get the full stats of the thing. And then you don't go any further than that. Like, none of this matters. It matters, but it doesn't matter. The capital takes a, I believe, -1 penalty to its rolls for every additional subsector away something is. So this place affecting here is going to take a -5 because it's 5 away. If it wasn't the capital system, it would be taking a -10. If I'm remembering my stats right, I'd have to bring up the nation book. So you get better control over your galaxy with your capital. Technically, so I don't want to take even a -5. Well, if you've built up a world here, your world, your system itself could affect itself, or a singular world, if you wanted to affect specifically this area, you can use this system to affect this system at only a -2, etc., etc. So you want sort of hubs of civilization with spokes heading out. Theoretically, you could build everything up. You could build everything up, or you can build one thing up. You can build tall, or you can build wide. It's technically a little harder to build wide. That's not entirely true. It might be a little hard to build tall. You need money to fund your system. You can theoretically just build that system up with dice and swarms and stuff to cover that, technically speaking. You could, however, build out and collect a lot of systems to get the stats up in one system, which is easier to do. Or you could try and build every system up, but you're going to be spending a lot of time doing that because every system would need severe investment, but then you're taking penalty due to population control, not limiting population, but loyalty penalty for large populations. You have a large population, they're going to have different views, and you're going to have a penalty. So you need to basically invest in keeping your population managed, unless you want severe penalties. I say managed, I don't mean lessened, I just mean like not angry with you specifically. So you're not taking severe penalties on your rolls, which is why the easiest way to run a nation is to have a lot of lesser worlds with low populations boosting one world with a high population. The benefits to having system capitals, sector capitals, that kind of thing, which helps boost your population. But that basically lessens the penalty you're going to take. His entire system behind it. Like I said before, not today, but many times before, we have systems for everything. It's not like they're needed. It's not like one needs to get into the complexities of it. But just in case we ever need to, we can. But basically, you can technically run a nation in a variety of different ways. It's just easiest. When I say low population, to be fair, I do mean like 10 billion, like that's what we consider low population. 10 billion per world, not per system, per every world in the system. So, you're looking at systems with 100 billion people being low population. And then, of course, there are worlds usually in the frontier with far less people, basically worlds that are barely colonized at all, worlds with as few as, 0 people or 1 person. It happens, usually in the frontier, not in civilized space or central, or in the central nations, You have to go a ways out there to find that, to areas with lacking FTL lanes and all that. But, like, I mean, we'd have to get into the entire series of it to talk about. But basically, running a nation is like looking at a spreadsheet. It's it also depends on how complex the player wants to be. You can run a nation pretty much on autopilot. There's even simplified nation rules. But sometimes you want to get into the details. You want to know your imports, your exports, your political figures, your leaders, what type of government you have, what benefits that government gives, which individuals are doing this, the different sub-factions, the different political parties, all of that. And you can. We even have an auto-calculating sheet. It is a completely custom auto-calculating sheet. And I couldn't tell you what it does. Like, I mean, I have a loose idea of some of the math on the sheet. I mean, I made the sheet, but, you know, it was a while back, a long while back. I don't remember what every section even means. I mean, I know what the nation running things mean. I sometimes look at it and go, why? Why is this calculating like that automatically? Mostly because we updated a part of maintenance rules, specifically army maintenance. I've always had a problem with the costs of armies. Specifically, maintaining armies in Galactic Requiem has costs. I know, wild, crazy. You have to actually pay your soldiers and maintain their gear. Absolutely insane. Who would have guessed that logistics were important? I know, but bear with me. Logistics are required for armies. Absolutely insane. But you need to give them supplies and money. And if you can't get them the supplies and money, bad things happen. You also need to train them and all that. And all that costs, well, money. Well, logistics costs supplies. Well, logistics doesn't cost, what sort of? Ships have ratings. Generally, we hand wave. I say hand wave, I don't mean like we actually hand wave it. What I mean is we have a generic ship type that's pre-calculated called a support ship. It has stats. It can carry a certain amount of supplies. These, and a certain amount of soldiers. These supplies are then given to forces. These forces, with their supplies, then enact orders. I know it's absolutely insane. But that's just, people need bullets to do their shooting, and they need food to not starve to death. Which also happens on worlds. Like, that's not just an army thing. Like, we have utilities that you must provide your world. If you don't provide them utilities, bad things happen. So you provide your world utilities. I don't even have the sheet open. So it's real difficult here. But in short, what I'm trying to say is armies currently cost a lot. A lot. I sometimes get annoyed at how much armies cost. So I'm constantly trying to figure out whether the rules work. Because we have the sheet here now. Nope, we lost it. Nope, here it is. Nations and organizations. So, it costs 0.1. No, that's not right. Let's try that again. It costs 0.1 credits. Credit units, if you want to be technical. So, like, money is called credits. Credit units are the galactic scale unit of money. Being a credit unit, also known as a nation scale monetary unit, is 10 billion galactic standard credits. So, you pay about 500,000 soldiers, 0.1 credit unit. You also pay 0.2 supply, assuming you want your people to not be terrible. You pay them 0.2 supply upkeep. By the way, this is every week. Every single week, per 500,000 soldiers, you're giving 0.1 credit unit, 0.2 supply. If you want to know the equivalent value of supply to credit units, it does depend on the economy, but usually it's 1-to-1. So it's a total of 0.3 credit units for one army of 500,000 soldiers, or per week. Or, let's do the math. There we go. $3 billion, or credits, per week to run your army. Now, that gets worse if you go to invade something. The reason that gets worse is do consider you need to move supply from point A to point B. This supply you need to move needs to go on supply destroyers, a fleet of about 100 supply destroyers, or whatever other supply ship you have. So you're loading about, well, an amount of supply onto your destroyer. That destroyer, crazily enough, has a crew. That crew, I know this is going to be wild, needs pay and supply. So you then need to pay point one for the crew and point one for the supply. So you, that's just additional 0.2. But let's be honest, a supply destroyer is going to carry, well, a supply destroyer fleet is going to carry like 200 supply. So it's not like it's a significant, like, oh, now things are so much more expensive, because they can supply several armies. They can supply several armies for a long time. So it's not like it's, well, now it's, you have a supply destroyer, so you need a supply destroyer to supply that supply destroyer. No, 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 no. No. It can supply itself super easily. At basically, it can supply several armies, it's fine. Technically, you can even supply with other vessels, but, like, I'd have to calculate math, like how much you can carry cargo space-wise. You also need to spend maintenance on vehicles. There's basically entire system behind how all this works. I think we've gotten into it a little bit here, but I don't think it's really worth getting into right now too much, because I'd have to just actually crack open the book and explain it all. But in short, nations have stats and individuals. Nations take turns, and it's really neat because, well, like I always say, our goal is to simulate a living universe. And so it's real nice to be able to look at a nation, look at its stats, specifically for a world, which is why we have averages, just to be able to basically look at this thing and go, okay, this world is blockading this world's trade. We have to now increase the cost of this good by this much and not have to just bullshit the answer, you know? I don't have to go, okay, this world is blockading this world. That's going to be a 3% price increase. I can actually look at the numbers and say, okay, the numbers say that it's going to be a 9% increase because this stat versus that stat times this, divided by this, multiplied by this, carries a 3, equals this. I mean, of course, we still can just say this much percent, but we have the option of being accurate to galactic affairs. Which is why I like having a system for everything in Galactic Requiem. There are rules for debate. There are rules for contacts. There are rules for basically all the stuff. So basically, there's no gray area, you know? There's no, like, of course we can, as the GM, we can always just be like, yeah, it does this, or this does that. We can always do that. But we have an underlying basis of rules, so if something's important to the galaxy, or for fairness sake, we can just look at the rules and extrapolate a correct, law-accurate answer. Of course, while this is a tabletop RPG, Galactic Requiem itself is a setting more so than a tabletop RPG. So, the entire goal is that the tabletop RPG emulates accurately the setting more so than the setting emulates the tabletop RPG. You know what I mean? Like I always say, we provide a world. The tabletop game is to simply have a fair and accurate way to enact the world that is unbiased. I say, as an Imperial Lord, it's funny because the Empire's the best. Like, technologically speaking, and amount of territory. That's not to say that the Empire's not terrible. Like, everything has its own method of balance. Imperial conflicts within itself. The fact that, sure, the Empire has, I think I've been over this before too, the Empire, we are the best at space combat. That's not to say we haven't lost at space combat. It's just to say, in any fair battle, and by fair, I mean if it's a 1-to-1 fleet engagement, the Empire will win. If it's a 5-to-1 in fleet engagement, the Empire will win. If it's a 10-to-1 engagement, it's a fair fight. It could go either way. On the ground, our terrible reliance on the worst tactics imaginable means that we don't always succeed at the ground war. And by the worst tactics imaginable, I mean, well, if you have been paying attention, the best example for Imperial society, for you Elysians out there, is 1700s, 1800s, early 1900s nobility and warfare views. For instance, hey, this isn't working tactically speaking. Should we change our thing to do this? No. We've always done it this way. This is the best way to conduct warfare. You know? Very, very stagnant, noble society. You know? Not the best. Well, I mean, it is the best. I'm an Imperial. I'm not sure what you mean by that. It of course is the best system. But, I mean, you know, having been a conscript, being a first generation Imperial Lord, because titles can be earned by any Imperial citizen, well, any Terran Imperial citizen, as long as you're a Terran, or some other form of Terran, any of the Terran types, then, you know, you can become an Imperial Lord. And, well, I say become, you have to have a star system and be accepted as an Imperial Lord, not by your populace. Who cares what the populace thinks? I mean, it's important to keep the populace happy, but I mean, you know, who cares what the populace thinks? It's what the Imperial government thinks. And if your Lord gives you a world, I mean, you know, I mean, it's a little important what the populace thinks. If they're always rebelling, I mean, then you're going to probably be in trouble with your lord because you're not going to be able to meet your tithe. I mean, that's the downside of being an imperial lord. Um, Taxes. Sure, you get to command vast armadas and have wealth beyond imagining, be practically immortal, basically be a super soldier. But, I mean, you have to pay taxes. Now, so do galactic citizens. I think we've been over this before, too. Did you know that the absolute highest tax is, like 190 credits a year? Genuinely, if you're a citizen of the galaxy, if you are not a corporation, you're paying 190 credits a year if you're in what is considered oppressive taxes. I'm taking a minute because I want to make sure I am right. I like giving accurate information. Did it wrong. The base, I confused two numbers. The base tax is 120 credits a year for a citizen. The highest tax possible, I say it's the highest possible, it's not really the highest possible. It's basically the highest you'll probably ever see, is 960. I was confusing the 1 and the 9 to the 2 and the 9 technically. So yeah, 120 to 960 credits a year. You know? Not bad. Especially when like the galactic minimum that you will be paid is like 20 credits an hour. Technically, you can get paid as little as 10 credits an hour or even 5 credits an hour, but the likelihood of that is unlikely. And I quote, the rough average pay in civilized space is 20 to 30 credits an hour, unless you live in the Federation of Allied Nations, or the FOAN. If you live in the FOAN, you live in a, well, you live in a post-scarcity society. Congratulations. If you live in the Federation of Allied Nations, you get free money, sort of. They, the Federation of Allied Nations are a little bit communist. They also have universal basic income and robots. I mean, it's not like everywhere doesn't have robots, but long story short, galactic politics. There are certain limitations on the amount of automation allowed. The Federation of Allied Nations is one of the few nations that disregards this. Not only are all of their workers paid the exact same amount, but they all also get paid universal basic income. So they can work, but they don't have to. They just get money. Which, well, which would be quite an enticement for people to go there if they weren't the Federation of Allied Nations. There's a bit of, well, we'd have to get into national politics to get into why Federation of Allied Nations isn't a unified group, technically speaking. Federation of Allied Nations are, well, if you can't tell by the name, they're a federation of allied nations. let's give them a look. So, you see, Foan territory, Federation of Allied Nations territory. Notice how there's all these little bits in their territory. The Tornin, the Caruses, Quarus, Graxus, Varia, Tadak, Raktas, Yorton. Yes. All different major nations in the Foan. Technically, there's also all these neutral nations in the Foan that don't fall into one of the major nations. But in short, Quarus, which is home of the Quarusians, also known as Terrans. They're Terran, like you or me. They are, well, the primary communist government of the area. Graxus is part of the alliance, but isn't communist at all. In fact, they don't get along with the Federation of Allied Nations, despite being a part of it. Then again, the Federation of Allied Nations, the history of why they're allied goes back to the First Galactic War. But in short, Graxus, they're reptilians, very caste-based society, very much like the Empire. I mean, we're not caste-based in the Empire, but like the Graxus, they're very, very noble-based. They have lots of nobility and so forth, and they do have a class system, if you want to be technical. Like, for instance, all the noble houses of Graxus, or not all of them, but the majority of noble houses in Graxus are lines of dragons, Like, probably not. I mean, it's possible to find a house at one of the great houses that doesn't have dragons in it, I guess. I don't know, I haven't been there. But, like, they care about bloodlines and all that. I suppose the Empire sort of does, sort of. More so just in the sense that you inherit your title, or you can gain your title. You can't really gain a title in Graxus. You're either one of the noble houses or you're not, But, very against what a lot of the rest of the Foan is about. Same with the Tadok. Same with the Raktas, sort of. Sort of. The Raktas are weird. They're insectoids. So it gets complex. Same with the Sjorten, honestly. It's very much just. Well, I'd have to bring up my book. I don't have my book in front of me. But if you're a Terran in the Foan territories of the neutral ones or Quarus, you're very likely gonna have a good time doing whatever, as opposed to being under the absolute control of the Galactic Bank, who make all the, well, currency stuff, which is useful because we have our common currency, galactic standard credits, but also concerning because we have to have our credits authenticated. I mean, even the Empire has to have its credits authenticated. And then there's the entire Galactic Council, which is not the faction. Of course, if we zoom out, you can see there's the faction, the Galactic Council, but there's also the Council itself, which is the meeting of all the nations, well, the civilized space, but heavy influence from the fact that the credits are controlled by basically corporations, like Omnicorp, leads to, well, crazily enough, Omnicorp doesn't have the largest corporation, by the way. Not by a lot, but they are the biggest corporation. Needless to say, basically, surprisingly, it goes back to ancient history. In short, politics are complex, and there's lots of conspiracies, and there's lots of shady stuff about why there isn't mass automation, and whether the corporations are for or against it. Needless to say, there's a status quo, and certain parties enjoy the status quo. I mean, the Empire, for instance, enjoys the status quo. We don't seek to use automation to basically solve problems, unlike the Imperial Communist Party. I know that Imperial and Communists don't really go together. It's because they were part of the Empire, but they wanted to use technology for equality, while we are loyal to the system and have lords, which they got rid of. Which I suppose means we're supposed to dislike the Foan. That was part of the Second Imperial Civil War. That's one of the factions of the Second Imperial Civil War. I know, a little bit confusing. Second Galactic War, First Galactic War, First Imperial Civil War, Second Imperial Civil War. Gets a bit complex. In short, the Civil Wars are Empire versus Empire. The Galactic War, the First Galactic War was the galaxy, civilized space versus the Empire. The second one, civilized space versus civilized space. Then there's the Imperial Ancient War, which is ancient history of the Empire versus the ancient nations during the era of colonization. Yes. We could bring up our big book of history. Yep, ancient nations, non-FTL colonization, then the arrival of the Empire. The Empire beat the Ancients, the Imperial Civil War, the first one that is. Then the non-ancient nations achieve FTL. We even have a list of who achieves it when. For instance, did you know that the northern nation of New Albion was one of the first nations to achieve FTL? The first non-ancient nation to achieve FTL. It's not even entirely true. I mean, it's mostly true. Technically, they first achieved teleportation through magic, and then they achieved teleportation through the FTL drive. The second nation? What? Sorry, I was just shocked there for a second. Yes, on occasion I do get shocked by the lore that I myself wrote. It happens. Apparently, I suppose the orbs and New Albion, yeah. The orbs and New Albion. And then the Seortan, which shocks me. I thought it wasn't the Seortan. But apparently, one of the earliest southern nations to achieve FTL, by southern, I think we know this, those are northern, those are southern. Apparently one of the first southern nations to achieve FTL was the Seortan. The rock creatures. Who would have guessed? Certainly not me, despite being the person who wrote that. Well, that's even more shocking. And then the insectoid hives, and then the Terrellian Dominion, and then the Terrans. Then the Zeros Consortium. And then slowly after that, most other people. I thought because the Terrans were so common, they were first. Well, near first. I mean, if you want to be technical, New Albion are Terran. The northern Terrans. Technically, when we say FTL, do understand that slower than light colonization started in um, 111,998,270,000. FTL was achieved in 112,012,249,658. So there was a good 12 million or so years of slower than light stuff going on. I mean, there was also the Imperial Ancient War going on at the time that basically messed up a lot of things. And given that we're currently, I mean, for rough estimation, without having to do math, we're about 7,000 or so years after FTL, give or take a few. Yeah, I believe we're like, I know that it's not exact. We're not exactly 7,894 years after FTL, but we're somewhere around 7,000 or so years after FTL. I say we, I mean, you know, given that we're not the Empire. Not the Empire. Whenever I talk about when technology was achieved, just assume there's a little asterisk that specifically says not the Empire. The Empire haven't had a technological breakthrough in ever. Ever. Just assume that Imperial technology has always been what it is. It's easier that way. It's not even some conspiracy thing. No, just we arrived in the galaxy with the advanced tech we have because we're not from here. It'd be kind of hard to achieve something greater than tech level 26 when you show up with tech level 26. That's the highest tech level, by the way. Technically, I mean, our forces are tech level 16. Our ships are tech level 20, sometimes 22. The average, by the way, is tech level 16. The council pushes tech level 18 sometimes. The most advanced nation, other than the Empire, like the most advanced non-ancient nation, is the robots of the Coalition and the Commonwealth. Both of which are some of the most advanced, with their average tech being tech level 20, if I recall correctly. Those being the robots of the Coalition and the Commonwealth. Hmm. But in short, um, I mean, on the on the aspect of world building, because this is World Building Wednesday, even I fall for the little issue that, I mean, it's mostly because I don't have a lot of tokens. It feels like I just used the generic tokens, but the majority of the galaxy is Terran. Or, for you Elysians out there, translated to your language, human. The majority of the galaxy is human. There's just a lot of them. I mean, not numbers wise, if we're being technical. The insectoids win there. The insectoids have all sorts of creatures that they consider part of their grouping. So, when you have a colony of ants, your world might as well be a Dyson swarm. So, population count of insectoids gets large, especially when you consider that they have Dyson swarms, and then the numbers just skyrocket. But you will basically find Terrans everywhere. That's not to say there are Terrans literally everywhere. Like, you're probably not going to find Terrans in the insectoid hives territories. You're probably not going to find them in. You can probably find a few in Rock-Toss territory, a few in Tadok territory, a few in Grax's territory. But there are a lot. Point is, the Galactic Council is an amalgamation of other nations, but there's a significant number of Terrans in the Galactic Council, even though there are a significant number of non-Terrans. There's just Terrans everywhere. But I suppose that's just a statement on how. What's what I'm looking for? How Terrans are very the word adaptable. You know. Let's see. If I recall correctly, it has to do with the fact that the Terrans were one of the first slower than light colonizers. And did a lot more slower than light colonization than a lot of other nations. Sure, Sorton were first in FTL. Well, other than the other Terrans, the northern Terrans. But, which I wonder if that has anything to do with casters. Casting's rare. Casting being magic. It's rare. Exceptionally rare in the South. I know why it's rare in the South. We're not going to get into why it's rare in the South. In short, why casting's rare in the South has something to do with Eldritch Space. But we're not going to get into too much detail about that. In short, I wonder if it has anything to do with northern slower than light and FTL colonization being the still existence of casters in the South. Probably not. Casting's weird. Anyway, we've rambled about random things for quite a while. It's time I go and get coffee. So, I'm going to go, and we're going to call it there. Next time, we'll actually roll dice and have some fun. Get back into the roll of things. Do all the stuff that we usually are supposed to do. I thank you all for stopping by. My apologies for the ramble heavy episode. I hope you have a great day. And as always, I've been your host, Casimir Basilius, Imperial Lord. Yes. Have a good day.